Super cool.
Yeah. So it was sort of just briefly in psychology, really. I started as a double major in psychology and statistics, and then decided to focus more on the stats side. After I did stats mainly for my undergraduate, I moved on to science and then decided to focus more on the stats side. I think I'm getting some feedback, which is unfortunate.
It was my computer. Now you're live. Now people can see you. So if you want to tell who you are, now everybody can hear you.
Great. What should I start with? I've been talking for a minute.
No, because they didn't hear. They didn't listen to the first part because it wasn't on YouTube. Now it's on YouTube, so they should.
I'll just start over. Hi,
Thank you very much.
Peter Kraft, and today I'm talking from the University of Washington in the eScience Institute, where I am currently a postdoc. I did my PhD at MIT in computer science, but was focused on kind of theoretical issues in collective intelligence. And in that process, I was doing both a lot of empirical work, especially doing multi-participant experiments where we would run online experiments, mainly on Mechanical Turk, bringing participants together and having people perform collaborative problem-solving tasks or collaborative search tasks. And through those exercises, as well as through observational analysis, I've done a lot of work with financial data and also social media data. Then I started to develop a kind of broader theoretical framework for thinking about collective intelligence. And the main outcome of that from my PhD was thinking about kind of conditions that lead to what I call rational collective agency at the group level. So we can think about groups as being either disorganized and not able to accomplish their goals so effectively because of that disorganization, or being more aligned in their capacities. So one of the theoretical results that I was interested in that I could talk more about today is kind of alignment conditions that lead groups to be able to act coherently and accomplish their goals effectively. And those conditions were having aligned, accurate beliefs about the world, that people share information with each other in a group and are then able to understand what's going on around them and agree on what's going on around them, having shared preferences or kind of utility functions that allow you to act in accordance with some group goal, and being able to solve coordination problems. So being able to choose among sets of good actions for the group to take together. And using this kind of lens of these conditions for general collective intelligence or for high performance across a variety of tasks, then I started to think about how to both categorize some of the existing literature along these lines, as well as thinking about some commonly observed social mechanisms like homophily or social learning or social preferences, and how those fit within this as well, for trying to understand how human groups have culturally evolved or maybe biologically evolved to be able to operate together and achieve effective collective intelligence. Nowadays, I've started to move more towards understanding large-scale real social systems and study those in more details. I'm especially interested nowadays on studying rumors and understanding both the kind of structural and contextual factors that can lead to different progressions of rumors, or different kinds of evolutionary mutations, or kind of merging events of different threads of rumors, and both the positive and the negative of that. So how rumors can operate as kind of a tool for collective sense making in an environment, as well as the propagation of false rumors, so leading to the kind of failures of collective intelligence.
Super cool. Super cool. But for example, how did you modelize the common beliefs inside a community? How can you measure the presence of common beliefs, of a common attitude toward the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are lots of ways to do that. How I end up defining it in a lot of my research is through expressed beliefs in actions. There's one idea from cognitive science that I like to draw upon in my own work pretty frequently, which is this idea of probability matching. The idea of probability matching is in contrast to what's called maximizing or utility maximization in a kind of rational agent framework. So the typical model of human behavior that a lot of quantitative social scientists use is called this rational agent framework that comes from the tradition of economics, where people are assumed to have beliefs and have utility functions and act to maximize the expected utility that they can gain in a certain environment according to the beliefs that they have about the world. This turns out to happen sometimes that people will maximize their expected utility, but also many times people do something called probability matching, which is not to absolutely maximize their utility, but to actually choose actions with some probability related to the beliefs that they have that action is a good action to take. So, for example, in one of the typical kind of stylized tasks where you have a lottery between two options and you have some evidence that one lottery is better than the other, in a maximizing model, you would want to pick the option pick the lottery that you think is better all the time, because that would maximize your expected outcomes. But in a probability matching framework, what you actually do is you choose a lottery with probability proportional to the probability that you think it's the better lottery. And one of the interesting things about this pretty commonly observed, seemingly irrational individual human behavior is that when you look at a population of people who are participating in this probability matching, then as you have 1,000 people doing this, all of these people are making stochastic random decisions. They're all doing this. If they're all doing it according to the same belief, then that will lead to the distribution of beliefs being revealed in that population as basically just the proportion of people who are making a certain decision. And so this is one tool for just exposing a kind of distribution of beliefs that people have in a group according to what actions that they're taking. It also, if you have repeated measurements, can reveal something about how aligned those people's beliefs are. Because if someone's probability matching on their beliefs and they do that over time as well as instantaneously, then you can get a sense for also what their level of uncertainty is in a certain decision or in a certain belief.
Super cool. Super cool.
There are other interesting ways too. Another class of models that I work with is Bayesian models of cognition, which is closely related to the ideas of probability matching and rational agency. And if any of you have studied Bayesian statistics or know about that kind of stuff, what a Bayesian model does is it postulates a structure of the world or a structure of the environment, and then allows you to infer things about the environment or come to beliefs about the environment according to data that you've seen generated from that process. And this is just statistical machinery that, using the rules of probability, specifically Bayes' rule, allows you to arrive at beliefs given the kind of model structure as well as the data. And one of the interesting things we can do in the case of modeling human behavior is say, suppose that a person has a particular mental model of the world, and then, especially in laboratory contexts where we can control what information is being presented to them, then if you assume that people are being Bayesian and operating under a certain mental model, and you know what information that they have, then you can infer what beliefs they must have according to that model, given the information that they've received. And then you can check that by seeing, are their actions consistent with the beliefs that we expect them to have according to this model. So Bayesian inference is an interesting method also for revealing latent beliefs, just as a kind of general purpose tool for doing latent variable inference.
Cool. I have another, guys, do you have questions? Because I'm like taking all the space.
I have a question, actually.
Okay, please.
Well, one of my papers that I presented last meeting was about the intersection between artificial and collective intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how you could see collective intelligence help artificial intelligence, since artificial intelligence is a really used term nowadays, and trying to see that everywhere. How do you see on that subject?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the street goes two ways. I use artificial intelligence in thinking about collective intelligence, and I have one project recently with some lab mates where we're looking at also how collective intelligence can inform distributed AI, and that it also actually relates to some of my work for my PhD too. Generally, I think the mapping that I see is we can think about collective intelligence as being a kind of distributed AI, or even the class of models that I typically use. I do a lot of mathematical modeling, and the types of mathematical models that I use for understanding collective intelligence are these kind of distributed inference models. So where, as I was talking about in Bayesian inference, you have some mental model of the world. Typically, you think about doing inference in such a model with a single agent or a single processor. There is also a huge class of distributed inference algorithms, which are if you have a bunch of agents or a bunch of computer processors, then how can you distribute data among these processors or agents, or how can you distribute computation? And that both, for me, informs how to think about collective intelligence, because we can use these distributed inference models as models of human collective intelligence, but also provides a route for collective intelligence research itself to inform the AI side of that. And a couple examples of that from my own work are, firstly, this analysis of an online social trading platform that I did called eToro, in which we specified a new distributed algorithm for doing Thompson sampling, which is an AI technique for solving what are called distributed multi-arm bandits, which is the type of learning problem where you have a bunch of actions that you're trying to learn, which is the best action to take. And Thompson sampling is a very effective algorithm for solving these multi-arm bandit problems. And the social mechanism that we discovered inspired us to pursue a kind of new distributed algorithm for solving that problem. In another piece of recent work with a lab mate, Deval Ajoda, I don't know if you've been in touch with him, but he'd be a fun person for you to talk to too, maybe. We've been pursuing the idea of how network structure, or how different network structures might be better or worse for different kinds of distributed inference algorithms. So specifically, we were looking at the recent evolutionary strategies algorithm for training deep neural networks. I don't know if you all are familiar with that literature or not, but most of the time when you do deep learning, you're using an algorithm called stochastic gradient descent, where you're explicitly just a single processor usually is computing the optimal or correct gradient given the data that it's seen, and then the learning algorithm kind of moves in the direction of that gradient. Evolutionary strategies was a distributed algorithm that was offered as an alternative to stochastic gradient descent, where instead of explicitly computing gradients, you have a collection of agents who are accumulating rewards in the case of reinforcement learning, and then sharing the rewards that they get with permutations or perturbations of the parameters that are other current best parameters that have been found, and then getting a kind of approximate gradient by combining the rewards that all of those distributed agents have gotten with those perturbations of the current parameters. So this algorithm, as it's been formulated, uses a kind of fully complete network of agents where all the agents are sharing parameters with each other to a kind of central fusion unit. But we were exploring the idea that maybe, and this was inspired from Lazar and Friedman's work in collective intelligence, where they showed that different network structures can actually be better or worse for doing collective search in complex environments. We explored the idea that instead of having a network of fully connected agents, if we use complex networks, then we might be able to get faster learning in these evolutionary strategy algorithms. And that turned out to work in the case that we looked at, where we were using one of the benchmark multi-agent reinforcement or benchmark reinforcement learning tasks called MuJoCo.
And a more practical question: could you suggest us places online or physical places where we can find the most interesting papers and works on collective intelligence? Is there a repository or a website that or a conference, because we know about collective intelligence the National Collective Intelligence Conference.
Yeah, yeah, I was wondering about that. Do you plan to go to that this year?
You're going to Switzerland?
I plan to be there. Yeah, are you all going?
I'll probably be there as well.
Cool.
So we'll meet there. But I mean, how do you keep updated on the latest papers, on the latest findings?
Yeah, good question. I think partly just knowing who works in the area and keeping an eye out for their papers. I use Google Scholars a lot. Google Scholars both gives updates about new papers coming out, as well as being able to search for papers and search for papers that are citing papers, etc. It's also, most of the literature that I find is just things that people reference. So I guess you kind of just need a good recent piece of work that has a pretty comprehensive literature search. I know that a couple of years ago, I was keeping a notebook myself that's online on my website about a lot of work in collective intelligence that's up to date as to like 2013 or 14. More recently, there was a student, I mean, basically anyone who's writing their thesis is going to be doing some literature review. And so if you look at recent theses that are coming out from people who are working in collective intelligence, then those will usually also give you pretty good anchors into the literature. The notebook that I have online is more comprehensive than the references that were in my thesis. But if you look at other people, so I graduated from Sandy Pentland's group, and there are a couple of people in Sandy Pentland's group who are working in collective intelligence right now. I don't know if they're on your radar or not, but Dhaval Joda and Abdullah Abatuk and Alejandro Campara are also on there. So checking out their work is a good place to start. Joshua Becker, also at UPenn, recently put together a list of, I think, 100 papers in the Wisdom of Crowds. That was a good resource for especially more recent stuff in that area specifically. I think that's the Wisdom of Crowds I see as a little bit of a subset of the collective intelligence literature, so that won't be super comprehensive in terms of the entire span of what you could think of as collective intelligence research. But also, collective intelligence can be, I think, so broadly conceptualized that it'll be hard to find something that covers all the ground. Like it's something that could span across almost all disciplines of social science, or some subset of all the disciplines of social science. So there won't be any one particular person who I think has all of this stuff in one place.
Because the thing that we notice is that there aren't so many people working on the subject, that there are fewer people than I thought when I started reading the literature. I mean, I would say that there are like no more than 2,000 people in the world studying collective intelligence at a really high scientific level. Obviously, now everybody talks about collective intelligence, but there is pretty little literature on scientific literature on collective intelligence that it's even hard to define. I mean, there is no definition of collective. Every author gives his own definition, his own references.
Yeah, sort of typical for studying such a complex phenomenon. I think that also collective intelligence is a relatively new phrase. I mean, there's lots of other words that people have used for studying similar things, including wisdom of crowds, or when I was starting out my PhD looking at related work, I was looking a lot at the philosophy literature on plural agents or group agents, which is this area of philosophy that studies basically how groups can come together and act coherently. And that's related to literature on joint intentions and collective intentions, and that's related to multi-agent systems and shared plans and computer science. So there are lots of related areas that I think aren't represented frequently at the Collective Intelligence Conference, at least itself, because there are just so many things that are sort of relevant when you start thinking about collective intelligence. But yeah, 2000, for as far as researchers who call themselves researchers in collective intelligence and have that as a primary focus, I think there are probably fewer than 100, maybe even 10 or 20, I don't know, like PIs at least. There are not a huge number. And but this is also typical. Like when you get into more niche areas, then there typically aren't a huge number of people studying them. Machine learning has obviously exploded. So comparing to AI or machine learning as an area, it'll look small, but also AI was small in the 80s and 90s. Like every academic area starts out small, and I think it's still to be determined whether collective intelligence will have practical implications that lead it to become a big field. I think the thing that leads something to really explode like AI has is getting companies and governments involved in funding it. And then once there's money, that money pulls in a lot more people. If it's hard to get jobs in an area, and if you can't hire PhD students, then it's going to limit the growth of the area, and it's not going to attract as many new people. But if we end up getting some cool killer applications, like maybe in distributed AI or in thinking about how to design online systems, I'm really interested in the idea of design of online institutions. Then that could potentially lead to a lot more interest from funders as well.
Yeah, because one of the key problems of collective intelligence, as I noticed just reading some comprehensive book, is that many really good ideas that are pretty widespread in the collective intelligence literature will never become popular just because there are not enough strong incentives to put them in practice. I mean, just in some specific field, there is a really huge economic interest in implementing these new systems. But for example, there are a lot of fields, for example, education, where collective intelligence principles could really help to improve the quality of the education, the quality of the information spread inside the communities. But there is no interest. I mean, people do not want to spend their time, their money to contribute to this new system, because we still have to find a good set of incentives that make people be really interested in this new way of thinking about community. Mm-hmm. I think that there is a key problem in rethinking how a community works.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And that was actually one of the more applied pieces of work that's come out of Sandy's group in collective intelligence in the last few years. Again, the group that I did my PhD in was Encore Money had pursued this idea about how we can use social incentives instead of individualized incentives in order to kind of bootstrap on the trust that people have for each other and the reliance that people have on each other in order to, use peer incentives or peer pressure to better steer a group to be able to accomplish the goals that it has for itself. So I think taking that community perspective as opposed to the typical individualistic perspective is really powerful. And we're starting to see more people doing kind of organization scale analysis in industry, which could lead to more interest in collective intelligence. I think I'm also just not so concerned about it. Like for me, it's nice to have a smaller community because that means that the people who are in it, can know each other and be dedicated to what they're doing. I think like if it's an interesting class of phenomena to you, then it's not so important how big the academic area is from an intellectual point of view.
No, I agree. It's even easier to manage. I mean, because you know everyone inside the community and you can easily cooperate.
Yeah.
But the fact is that when you want to really change things, the starting point is the consensus that you have. That you need a consensus. I mean, you need a widespread consensus to implement new systems, especially when we talk about communities or social structures, political structures. Because as you said, usually the structures give shape to the interactions between people. I mean, the structure really influences the way people interact.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not able to influence how the structure is built, you're not able to test your ideas on a large scale.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think that if you have a good idea that, you know, is inspired from the literature on collective intelligence, then to some extent that can kind of speak for itself if you're able to implement that. Like that's the kind of thing that can help to build the community, and I don't necessarily think that the community around collective intelligence is necessary to publicize. And I'm sort of a little bit worried these days about being so impact focused. Like when you're asking about, you know, the size of the field or something, it sounds to me like you're interested in having and working in an area where you can have a big personal impact. For me, I've become sort of skeptical about that line of reasoning or that type of motivation, because at least for myself, I've found that when I try to pursue things that I think will be interesting to other people, I end up doing work that I'm not so happy with because I think it might not be like helping the people that I want to be helping. And I think being driven by impact in a community, for me at least, isn't the heuristic that leads me to the work that I'm happiest about. I think that for me, what leads me to the work I'm happiest about is being motivated just by my intrinsic interest in the intellectual problems, and you know what I think maybe interest in doing good for the world, or what sorts of things can I study that might help the people that I want to be helping.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question which is quite personal and a bit cliche, but I wonder where you would see yourself in 10 years working on. What subfield or what project?
Yeah, it's a great question. Right now, my 5-year plan is to really do a deep dive into understanding rumors, because collective intelligence itself is really, really broad, and I think to make good progress on any of that, you have to choose a more specific area to be focusing on. For my PhD, I did a lot of like pretty general framework kind of theory stuff. And so now I'm trying to study a smaller set of phenomena. Even rumors is like, there's a lot of stuff going on. And a rumor can be different things in a lot of different settings or different cases. But that's my 5-year plan, to just do a deep dive into that, like really get familiar with as much as I can that's been written about rumors in the last, 100 years, and try to make some progress on understanding those two. 10 years after that, right now, my working plan is to, after having gotten a handle on that particular case, again, popping up to the idea of understanding shared beliefs. I think my PhD work was very centered around modeling shared belief formation, or how people come to similar understandings of the world. Rumors are kind of one case of that, where a rumor is passed around and then people come to have some shared understanding of a particular situation. I hope that after looking at that more specifically, I can again go pop up a level and revisit the kind of larger theoretical ideas that I've been interested in. And these are actually happening in parallel too. I continue to be working on the same kind of models that I was working on for my PhD, and developing those more in the context of rumors and also just generally. But yeah, and that's, as far as academically or intellectually, that's kind of where I'd like to be. Basically, in 10 years, having a deep understanding of rumors, as well as a kind of broad reading of literature related to belief formation in social contexts, which is, you know, a topic that is still, even though smaller than collective intelligence, since it's more is specifically focused on beliefs and ignoring the work on coordination and cooperation, et cetera, is still huge, right? Is still touching upon sociology and communications and social psychology and economics. So there's a lot of ground to cover, even in that just small subset. But I hope that in 10 years, I have a better feeling about that. In terms of professionally, I'm not really sure, like career track, and we could talk about career stuff too, but that's kind of a different question to me.
But how old are you now?
Right now, I am 28.
Oh my God, so young. You already got your PhD.
Yeah, I kind of just kept doing the school thing.
Cool.
So now I'm a postdoc and actually taking more time to just, you know, do things I enjoy and that kind of stuff. I didn't really want to jump right into applying for faculty positions because I want to be able to have a little bit of an adventure in my life for a little while.
Yeah, sure.
Can I ask a question about sort of the more system design sort of perspective on this collective intelligence? So like, do you think, like, what kind of research has been done into, you know, a more maybe abstract principles of system design, you know, to construct systems in which collective intelligence can emerge and these sort of things?
Yeah, it's a great question. Theoretical work specifically in collective intelligence. So the bodies of work that I think about are, you know, economics is actually the discipline that has done the most mathematical, formal theoretical work of any of the disciplines of social science. And so that's kind of the first thing that always comes to mind when I think about this sort of question. There's an area of economics that you might have heard of called mechanism design, where they look at a lot of game theory and economic theory along those lines tries to look at the structure of an environment as it is and how people behave in that structure. Mechanism design looks at how to kind of optimize the incentives of the environment to create individual or collective behaviors that are desirable to the designer. That's, I think, the best developed theoretical framework for thinking about how to create institutions for particular purposes. In collective intelligence specifically, I think a lot of the work has been empirical. There's one piece of work that's sort of on this boundary was Abulik. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Andres Abulik, who's now at the Media Lab, but was in Australia until recently. And they were looking at the design of social recommendation systems and took a formal approach to this where they actually model the social recommendation system as a kind of, I think it was like a reinforcement learning system. And then they tried to optimize the design according to that model. So that was an interesting example of something that merged a little bit of the empirical work that's been going on in collective intelligence on different types of online social recommendation systems that there have been several pieces of work on, including some of my own work too. Also, the wisdom of crowds is a good example of that. Sometimes I think of the wisdom of crowds as being the kind of engineering side of collective intelligence, where we're thinking about the wisdom of crowds as kind of how do you aggregate beliefs effectively. And there have been many pieces of work that have looked at what are the best mechanisms for aggregation. And there's also some mathematical theory behind that drives those questions. So from the classic kind of Condorcet jury theorem stuff to more recent work looking at how social influence can be good or bad for wisdom of crowds in different contexts.
Okay. Do you think, like, maybe I would start from asking you, what is your definition of collective intelligence? Because I see, like, there are many ideas that are different, and I don't know if you've answered this before because I was offline for a millisecond, but, like, does it have to be necessarily human, for example, or do you define a more broad way?
I wouldn't say it has to be human. I think how I have defined collective intelligence in my own work, I like to distinguish between specific collective intelligence and general collective intelligence. So general collective intelligence I think of as being what kind of Anita Woolley and Tom Malone have been studying, and this is very clearly defined and scoped into the kind of social psychology area, where they're looking at correlations in performance across tasks within particular groups. So groups, specific compositions of individuals, in this case people, but maybe we can also define general collective intelligence for animals. I don't think it ever has to be specifically human. And the particular groups tend to have high performance on all tasks or many tasks, low performance on many tasks. So the performance of groups tends to be correlated. And they have a kind of battery of tasks that allows them to assess quantitatively what the general collective intelligence of a group is. So that's kind of one notion that you might call the Woolley-Malone general collective intelligence definition. Then that I think it's rightfully called general collective intelligence because you're talking about a group being able to operate across a variety of tasks. Whereas what I'm calling specific collective intelligence is about a system that's been more optimized for a particular task. So when you're talking about animals like ants and bees, doing house hunting or doing foraging, then these are more specific tasks that certainly are complex tasks and have a lot going on as far as subtasks as well. But the system itself seems to be optimized more directly towards that particular task. So my general perspective on this is to take a kind of computational view and treat collective intelligence as a group being able to accomplish some goal that it has specified for itself effectively. And that goal, if you want to be formal about it, can be specified as something like a reward function in a decentralized POMDP, which is a class of multi-unit systems problems, or you could talk about it in terms of there being a computational problem like sorting or search for an optimum, like an optimization problem. And those definitions of computational problems then provide a kind of normative standard on which we can judge the group's performance by. And so collective intelligence is just the group accomplishing that goal effectively.
Last question. What do you think about the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence? Are they working well on the subject for you, in your opinion? And if you know something also about the NYU GovLab, if you know these two institutions, what do you think about them? Because some of us are thinking about maybe applying for the PhD programs or.
I know less about GovLab because I haven't been so much on the political or policy side, but they certainly have a very good reputation. So I can definitely speak for that. But the Collective Intelligence Initiative at MIT is, I think, unquestionably leading the area. Tom Malone sort of has been the driving force behind the Collective Intelligence Conference, as well as the phrase collective intelligence. I think that is basically something that he made become a big thing, or as big as it is. So, they've definitely, from the organizational side, been leading the frontier. Research-wise as well, a lot of my work has been inspired by different pieces that have come out of their group. So I've personally felt like they've been influential.
Okay.
We have a question from the YouTube stream.
Yes.
I'll paste it in the chat so you can read it.
Can I ask you, what are your views on the support or contribution that people from different backgrounds could give? Yeah, cool. That's a fantastic question too. I think that different backgrounds is critical. I mean, I guess I'm not sure if you're talking about academic backgrounds or cultural backgrounds. Especially thinking of the few number of people studying and researching the subject of collective intelligence. I guess I'm not exactly sure what you're asking, so maybe you can clarify if I'm not answering. But collective intelligence as an academic area, or in terms of different academic backgrounds, I think touches upon a lot of things and is still missing people from many areas. One of the things that I think both academic and cultural diversity could help to address is bringing more of a critical or humanist lens. Something that's bothered me working in collective intelligence as well as more broadly in the area called computational social science is a lot of people coming like I did from statistics or physics or computer science or math and having less familiarity with the kind of humanist perspective that people from the kind of traditional social science, different disciplines. Yeah, same kind of thing. So like what I'm talking about right now is disciplines like sociology or critical theory. I feel like those perspectives have been missing. If there's like a specific background that you have that you're curious about, I can also talk about that. But I think that basically many disciplines are going to have some way to contribute to the collective intelligence conversation. And the way to leverage your own background is to think about, what are the key aspects of the lens that your discipline brings that it can add to the conversation. I did that with computer science. I have tried to take a kind of computational lens for understanding collective intelligence, like Tom Malone and Anita Woolley, who are doing this kind of social psychology stuff that initially inspired me to be thinking about this area. We're looking at it much more from a psychological perspective, and I tried to understand what they were doing from the perspective of computation and distributed artificial intelligence, as we were talking about before. So whenever you can effectively bring what you see as the kind of core of your discipline to the conversation about collective intelligence, I think that's going to be really productive.
Because basically what we are trying to do actually is to build, do you know the Sapienza University?
Which one?
The Sapienza, the main university of Rome, basically.
That you're all going to.
Basically, the Sapienza University is the biggest, the largest university in Europe. It has more than 4,000 PhD students and a total number of 120,000 students. It's the biggest university in Europe. There's nothing like this in. I think it's even the biggest in the world. And it's interesting because what we notice that because of the structure of the degrees and of the master and PhD programs, people do not have much time or many opportunities to cooperate, especially if they work in different fields. But collective intelligence is intrinsically interdisciplinary.
Mm-hmm.
It was born as an interdisciplinary field, but sometimes it's only something that you see stated on papers, but not actually in how research is led. So sometimes what we think is that basically we should build a system that allows people inside the field, not only of collective intelligence, people who work in the production of knowledge, a system that allows people who work in the knowledge production system to cooperate more effectively especially on interdisciplinary programs. And since there are so many people who are paid by our governments, by our institutions to do research and do not cooperate just because there is a lack of incentives or a lack of structures that allow them to cooperate, I think that a key point in advancing fields like collective intelligence is to create systems that allow especially PhD students, but also postdoc and researchers. So when people are young and do not have much, they are not so focused on their career, a system that allows those people to exchange ideas on a continuous basis, on a rolling basis, and to, for example, try to explore all the intersections between their fields. And sometimes I think there is a lack of an effective tool make this happen. For example, you're working on the other side of the ocean on a completely different context, but probably we have much in common than and obviously we decided to write you an email and to ask you to participate to this forum, and we were really proud that you answered back our email. But it's not it's really hard, I mean, to actually to cooperate, and for this reason there is a waste of resources.
I 100% agree with you, and I think what you're doing is awesome. And I hope that, you know, even if you start at the university, you can also, you know, include other folks like me or like other people interested in participating. It's always going to be hard for any individual to be incorporating a lot of different perspectives into a particular piece of work, just because when you're publishing, you're typically publishing within a discipline, and writing is really hard, and you have to be able to, like, writing within a disciplinary framework, you have to be pretty familiar with both a lot of work in that particular area as well as just the style of argument and writing. So I think that even though maybe a lot of work looks disciplinary, you might be surprised by how broad people are just in their knowledge or in their interests. But definitely having a forum where that conversation can be ongoing, I think sounds really nice. If any of you go to the Collective Intelligence Conference this year, hopefully you'll see that that conference often has people from lots of disciplines and is a really interesting mix of folks. So that might, you know, if you haven't been before, it might give you some inspiration too in your own organizing. But the problem with that is it's only 2 days once a year.
Yeah, exactly. It's not on a rolling basis. I mean, we should create a sort of network, a sort of community. For example, there's this startup in Italy called WeTip that gives communities effective tools to cooperate online, and that could be a starting point to create an effective network of people around the world that are working on collective intelligence or on related fields, to make them exchange ideas on a rolling basis, maybe trying to write interdisciplinary papers, or because sometimes even a conversation of 1 hour can open you many new windows and many new doors, and could even help you redefine your ideas, your research.
Yeah,
it's so hard because if to talk with you, I need to send you an email 3 weeks in advance.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes ineffective. It becomes too costly for an individual for two individuals to cooperate. If there was like a specific place online with specific rules that make these interactions easier and continuous, probably the field would benefit a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you're exploring that space, because I haven't seen those kinds of developments in any of the academic areas really that I'm aware of. I think the thing that sounds most similar to is like Stack Overflow, maybe, where you have communities of people around things like, you know, well, there are Stack Overflows for lots of things, I suppose, not just programming, but statistics and like cooking and whatever. And also similar sites. I remember a few years ago, there was a machine learning site called Meta Optimize. This guy, Joseph Turian, put together that had an interesting community of people just talking about machine learning stuff and kind of in the question and answer format. One of the challenges I feel like will be what brings people there and what keeps people there, and these can also be kind of different challenges. How to just continuously motivate people to stay engaged with the community. That means that I don't know what kind of benefit you could offer to people in the community, or what sorts of things you expect people to get out of it on the day-to-day, or like why would I want to be hanging out in the forum, you know, for whatever amount of time per day, or if I don't have to always be hanging out there, how you can scaffold participation in a more offline capacity. I think it's really exciting to be thinking about this set of questions and making it happening in collective intelligence. I think is exciting in sort of like meta. But yeah, I'm curious to see what y'all do, and I'm really excited to,
Hope to meet you at the CI conference.
What's that?
I hope to see you. Hope to see
I
you.
hope so too. I think it would be great to catch up there and see how this goes for you all.
There is another question.
Could be an option. Yeah, so that's an interesting idea. So yeah, specifically organizing it around specific projects, I think was the idea. That there reminds me of some of the work that Michael Bernstein at Stanford was doing with Rajan Vaish, where they were doing this. So Rajan and Michael Bernstein were the first people, as far as I know, to have effectively accomplished crowdsourced research, where they actually brought people together, like, I don't know if it's hundreds or up to maybe 1,000 people on a single research project, and they were actually able to bring these people who were largely not experts, but just interested in doing research, and ultimately publish papers, or have the crowd publish papers. So that might be an interesting model to look at for that too.
Okay, Peter. Thank you very much for your patience, for your time. If you want to stay with us, there's gonna be another hour of chit-chatting, I would say. But in any case, really, thank you very much for.
Thank you all. This has been great, and I'm again really excited about what you all are doing. And I think I will take my leave, but I hope that I'll catch up with you all at the Collective Intelligence Conference. Or
talk to you soon. And if you come to Rome, just send us a message, or to Paris. It'll be a pleasure for us to have you with us for a dinner, or if you need a place to stay, just send us a message.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, let me know if you're in Seattle.
Have you ever been to Rome?
I was in Rome when I was a teenager. I haven't been in many years.
It's the most beautiful city in the world. You should come again. They told me that Seattle too is amazing. I love grunge music, so everything is there.
Well, you're 20 years too late or something, 30 years too late. I don't know. Yeah, thank you all. This has been great.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, can you put me on streaming?
Yes. Hold on 2 seconds.
Okay, guys. Hi, everybody. It was great to have a real researcher, like a real expert on collective intelligence here. I found it really knowledgeable and informative. Now it should be my turn, but I was supposed to speak from 6:30 up to 7 p.m. and my time finished 2 minutes ago. So probably I'll let Pietro talk instead of me, because unfortunately today I need to leave earlier because I'm working with a group of Americans as tour managers. So just for this time, just for this meeting, I won't be with you the next hour. Pietro will talk about the relationships between politics and collective intelligence, and then we'll have a speech of Yannick on semantics. They're gonna be two really important building blocks of our reasoning on collective intelligence. So please stay with us. And about the second part of the book by Morgan, the book that I was reviewing last time, I will send all the notes. I will post all the notes and all the slides on our shared folder. Especially in particular, I made a really in-depth review of the book, handwritten review of the book that you can find that you're gonna find in the folder in a couple of days. If you want to read that book, I suggest you to read just my notes, because they're really comprehensive and really clear. I think they are basically a synthesis of the whole book. Now, last thing before you leave, it would be cool if Leonardo or one of his group could tell us what we have to do for next week, what we have to read, and where we can post the questions we have about the papers that they're gonna deliver us. So sure. I leave you in the hands of Pietro, that is our president and the best person I know here. So
well,
good luck, and see you in a week. Bye bye.
Ciao, Giorgio.
Ciao.
Well, okay, so I guess now the floor is mine. Well, as Giorgio mentioned, today I will be talking about collective intelligence in relation to politics. That means that more or less I'm going to be talking about this concept of civic intelligence. But just before starting, let me mention that unfortunately I've been working on different things in the past few days, and well, the presentation I prepare, it's kind of unfinished, and so I decided to take the format more of a discussion with you. I mean, I have a presentation prepared and I'm going to go through it, but the idea was to really discuss with you, to share some thoughts, and then hear from you and discuss with you what do you think are the major challenges that collective intelligence and the use of collective intelligence in the public space, in the public sphere, is going to bring. So I'm going to share the presentation, but first, maybe Leonardo, do you want to quickly tell us how you're going to proceed for next week? Because I saw in the folder you did put something. Are you planning on sending an email with the text so that we can then collect the questions?
Well, we just uploaded the as you said last week, we just uploaded the papers that we thought, you know, could be we would be discussing. So in particular, I can talk about mine because I've not read the other two yet. But in my paper, I just present. It's a review of the field of complex networks.
Okay.
And which I think is a fine field in the sense that it has many parallels with what collective intelligence is trying to do. So because it is a very, very big field, I thought a review would be a good place to start, so I can, you know, say what is the main approach, what are the methodologies that are used, and what are the main results, and then we can discuss, you know, what is similar, what is different. And so yeah, that will be, so we'll just do 3 presentations, and okay, each of the paper is related to one of the presentations. My paper is a bit long. It is a very it is a review, so it's, you know, it's easy to read, but it is a bit long. So I put 2 versions, one which I removed some of the parts which I think, you know, you can skip, and the rest is the full document.
Okay, thank you very much, Leonardo. So I'll probably send an email after this meeting with the link to the folder and to your documents, and then we'll probably send around also Google survey so that everyone can then write his own questions, and we're gonna set a strict deadline probably in 2 days to see what kind of feedback we get from them. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the sooner we have the questions, the more we can prepare. But
exactly.
If you give us last-minute questions, we'll do our best, you know.
Yeah, no, don't worry, for sure. We're just gonna set a deadline to Friday evening or something like that, because I guess it's not gonna take too long for people to go through the paper and ask a few questions. So thank you. I'll take the floor now, and I'm gonna try to share my folder with the presentation I prepared. Let me see.
Just before you start, if you want to hear a briefing of Mario's presentation.
Oh yeah, okay.
We can squeeze in that now, I think.
Yeah. Well, basically, I didn't really need a briefing. The idea was just to know if they had uploaded the paper, where they uploaded them, and how to proceed. So I think we're fine. And given the time constraints, I would start now with the presentation. And can you see it now?
Yes, yes, we see a screen.
Okay. So civic intelligence. Well, the idea, the reason why I decided to pick this topic is also because of my background. I mean, I've been studying a lot of social sciences, public policy, and sociology, and I really wanted to see how collective intelligence is being used in practice in the public sphere, and so I wanted to see how it has been used to make better public decisions, and more importantly, how it has been used to get people to cooperate and thereby increasing social capital. Again, these are broad clarification, and I think it's worth bringing some critical aspects to the table, because we often hear about civic intelligence as this, or collective intelligence as this thing that is going to make the world a better place. But I believe that we have some evidence already that in some cases, using the narrative of collective intelligence, we assisted to, you know, to a decay of the welfare state, of social services, of universal social services, towards something which hides behind the idea of co-production, participation, but in the end results in a loss of important social services. So I'm going to start with a definition that is by Schuller, who's an American professor. Of course, definitions are always problematic. This is just a working definition for today. And as you can read yourself, he says, civic intelligence means the ability of a society or even a small group to comprehend the problems that they're faced with and develop approaches towards solving the problem that are equitable and effective. In his case, his definition is a bit particular, because it just doesn't only focuses on effectiveness, efficiency, but also on the equitable aspects of civic intelligence. So the idea that everyone should be allowed to participate equally, and all these sort of things. As you can see, I put a few words there just to give an idea of some examples of what I consider, or like at least in the field, what do these people that focus on civic intelligence consider to be examples. So we have open government, open data, e-government, civic tech, community networking, and social innovation. So let me go a bit further with the plan for today. As I said, I'm going to firstly focus on some theoretical and general consideration about collective civic intelligence, trying to underline the major characteristics and aspects that are useful to discuss today. And I'm also going to look at some critical aspects on civic intelligence. And then I'm going to move to my second part of the presentation, which is going to be more about civic intelligence in relation to social innovation. And after this, we're going to hopefully have a discussion. I don't know if we're going to have time for a discussion, but I think we're going to have an ongoing discussion in the next few weeks by raising certain questions. So let's go to the general aspects of civic intelligence. And I think a major aspect that Schuller talks about, and scholars in the field talk about, is the ability of civic intelligence to really bring together people towards complex problems, and it really helps to tackle these complex problems. I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of wicked problems, but more and more today, our global community, or also local communities, are faced with problems that require a different approach, and more of a multi-stakeholder approach, in which you know, all the structure of government doing the whole thing is no longer enough. So we need new ways of collectively dealing with certain problems. And again, coming back to the definition that Schuler gave us, the idea is to address problems both effectively, efficiently, but also in an equitable way. So this is certainly key. Another important aspect, central aspect of civic ontology has to do with the idea that there are both formal and informal groups participating in this process of collectively solving societal issues. So in this case, everyone has a role, and both formally and informally. Last aspect has to do with the idea that there is a growing agenda of civic intelligence, so of the issues I mentioned before: e-government, open government, social innovation. It's something which is there, which is growing, and which people have been interested about for a long time. And well, it pretty much relates with some of the work that the sociology Putnam discussed when he wrote about social capital. But when he wrote about social capital, so the idea is that the community is at the center, and civic intelligence can be a creative and active and the human-centered approach towards, bringing about social change. So it's people that are at the center, so not abstract systems, and it's about bonding social capital. It's about combining community with civic. So in a way, it's about creating networks. And in this case, the role of civil society is particularly important. And as we can see in many, many different aspects, there has been a huge growth of non-governmental agencies, and the role of civil society has been, growing, and people think that it's the way to go forward to tackle important problems. And a final aspect that I wanted to talk about has to do with the citizens' co-production, which means that citizens are becoming more and more responsible for bringing services, social services, or for creating strategies that can produce the desired social effect. So the government is not only treating the public as a consumer, as it was in the past, but now it really uses the citizens as a partner. So its role is really expanded, and it's a new responsibility that you can see when you look at the example of e-government or open data. It really it's necessary that the citizens co-produces this data by uploading new data or by participating on certain platforms and these sort of things. So Linders is another American professor which talks a lot about how government is changing, and in one of his papers he talks about this idea of we government. So the idea that citizens are really at the core, and their intelligence, like together, is used to govern society. And when he talks about we government, he divides it in three major categories. So one is citizen sourcing, another one is government as a platform, and the last one is do-it-yourself government. So citizen sourcing is basically the services that start from the actions actually that starts from the citizens to the government. So it's the public helping government to be more responsive and effective. So the government is still the responsible one. So, for instance, in the case of open data, the government, if you look at the website of most of the open data projects around the world, the government is in charge of presenting the data and in an effective way, and of having a certain database. But then it relies on the citizens, and very often on the public servant, to upload the documents. So the influence of the citizens is quite important on the direction and the outcome of these new strategies. And the second is government as a platform, and it's exactly the inverse. It's government to citizens. So it's basically the government using digital data dissemination and computer-based services to provide new services to the public and to help citizens improve their day-to-day life, their decision-making, and their well-being. Well, in this case, the government is not responsible for the activity, but it can leverage the platform and influences citizens to bring greater public value. And well, I think an example of this could be e-government and services that citizens can use in order to, for instance, renew their ID card and these kind of things. And last but not least, Linders talks about do-it-yourself government, which, in my opinion, it's one of the most interesting, because it really relates to the idea of civic intelligence that was put forward by Schulen, and I think it's the more tricky one, because it's the idea that it's a citizen-to-citizen relationship. So it's the idea that citizens can effectively self-organize, and there are new opportunities for citizens-to-citizens co-production. And well, libertarian would love this, because it's a new way of substituting the traditional government with something else. So its responsibilities are not longer there. It's about citizens, it's about empowerment, it's about individual responsibility. And I think there are many problems going towards this direction. And some would even argue that this is the result of neoliberal dominance in the past 30, 40 years in the ideas of collective intelligence. And in general, it really shaped this way of understanding collective intelligence in a very individualistic and citizen-to-citizens perspective. Well, I had this table. I don't know if I'm going to have time to go through it, but I'm going to upload the slides, and you can certainly look at it for yourself. But basically, this is, again, from Linders, and here it tells you more or less for each of the categories how it works, the design, the execution, and the monitoring. And well, one which is particularly interesting for me, and which I've been working on a bit and studying, it's also how government as a platform work, because I think it relates again to that neoliberal discourse.
Yeah, so sorry, can you put full screen?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Wait a second. Because voila. Good. I don't know if you can still see it, because maybe the quality of the video is
better. It's better than.
Okay, well, basically what I was about to say, I was just focusing on one aspect of this table, which is related to government as a platform. And I find it interesting that the way now government is working as a platform in giving services to citizens through the website. And it relates really well also with the idea of nudging. I'm sure most of you are familiar with what nudging is, but it's basically the idea that the government is exactly using behavioral economics to design the policies and the services. Well, here he puts it in such a way that they preserve freedom of choice but encourage the socially optimal option. But some scholars have criticized this approach by arguing that basically, we're kind of influencing behavior and using nudging to kind of cut down other services that were there, and we're giving more responsibility to the citizens again. So let's talk about for a bit. I don't have much time because we kind of took a bit too much time for not too much. I mean, it was a very useful and insightful talk, but yeah, we don't have too much time to go over the other presentations. But anyway, critical aspects on civic technology. This refers very well to what I was talking about, that civic intelligence is kind of, fostering a new controversial social contract in which citizens are responsible of the co-production of public and social services. And this is particularly strong in the age of social media, right? And now services, many services are at least following the idea of civic intelligence, or at least the idea that some have of civic intelligence, is that we're going to have a growing number of internet-based services that are based on voluntarism of people, helping each other. And the problem is that the social contract that was in place before was mostly based also on universalist understanding of services, and by pushing for this e-services, apart from the fact that some people that don't have data literacy are gonna have quite a few problems accessing them, but the other problem also relates to the fact that these new services are going to be different and are not going to have all the same standards that the old social contract did hold. And this has to do exactly with the issue of voluntarism. And another few aspects that this is aspects that I've been thinking about that are related to civic intelligence. I think there are problems in terms of individual freedom, and this has to do again with the idea of people being forced to co-produce and be part of this delivering culture, which not everyone maybe wants to do. And the problem that you cannot opt out if a government is moving to e-services, then you're gonna have to renew your identity card online. So this raises quite a few problems. And of course, there are the more mundane critical aspects that are related to privacy, to monitoring and surveillance. And as some have even said, with the idea of this new civic intelligence and new services, where everything is constantly monitored, tracked, citizens are kind of rats inside a laboratory. And I think it's particularly interesting to see the relationship between civic intelligence and behavioral sciences. And again, this links very well to individual freedom and how individual freedom is basically attacked by this move. And another important thing that I think is problematic is the libertarian paternalism that many of these behavioral scientists have been talking about, because in some ways it creates a laboratory where the majority of the people are there subject to this, well, to these behavioral rules, but they kind of are also outside, and it's an expert-based technical minority that is in charge of this laboratory, and I think it's quite problematic. Okay, so let's move to, this is basically the second part of the presentation, in which I want to talk about a bit about civic intelligence in relation to social innovation. And in order to do so, let's first try to define what social innovation is, because many people have different definitions for it. And one way of seeing it, it's social innovation in relation to institutional change. So in this case, social innovations refer to more changes in cultural, normative, or regulative structures of the society. And these changes enhance the collective power. So again, this is the collective intelligence part, and the resources to improve its economic and social performance. So in a way, social innovation in relation to institutional change means that you're going to have a change in cultural, normative, and regulative aspects for the best. Another way of seeing social innovation is in relation to social purposes. So the idea that social innovation refers to new ideas that work in meeting social goals. And this has been a very powerful definition and influential definition. And it's about, you know, social innovation being the ability to create new innovative activities and services that are motivated by the goal of meeting a social need, and that are developed and also diffused through communities and organizations that have a social purpose. The last definition that I brought here has to do with social innovation and the public good, and here this refers to the how people have try to connect social innovation with the public good, but this is particularly the Center for Social Innovation talked about it, and I think it's problematic because then they don't define what is the public good. But moving forward, let's not spend too much time on definition. Social innovation basically refers to new trends to deliver public and collective services, and well, as many talk about it, social innovation is an idea that was put forward in the 90s, more or less, with so-called third wave rise, with Anthony Giddens' ideas. And but of course, it was there already in the 60s and the 70s. But in the 90s, it took a new form, and you can see, especially in Britain, with Nesta, we've been talking about Nesta in very positive terms last week. Nesta was at the core of this project, and so many times people have also linked social innovation with the decay of the welfare state, and so new ways of dealing with new social risks that all the governmental structure were not able to tackle. So new ways of organizing, and these new ways of organizing are based on what we talked about, on citizen to citizen, government to citizen, and citizen to government way of dealing with new problems. And well, I think the David Cameron, more recently, David Cameron's strategy on big society really tackled and relates to this issue. And you can see that at the European level, the European Commission has been very keen into developing social innovation, and they really believe that it's a new way to cater for new social risks. So we're basically moving from universalist understanding of risks and creation of universal services to something different, which is often based on social innovation. And of course, this brings me to the other point, which is distributional aspects. There are many distributional problems that social innovation brings because, well, for instance, not everyone has the same ability to engage in e-government or data literacy to do certain things. And another interesting example of civic intelligence, you would think it's amazing that in Paris you have part of the budget which is devoted to citizens' initiative. But the problem is that most of the time, the people that are going on that platform and choosing the kind of initiatives the Paris, the city should invest on, it's mostly middle class people. So you don't have the people from the banlieue, from the outskirts of the city working on this. So it's mostly middle class people. So social innovation it's something which leads to a bit of a distributional dilemma, and well, everything. It's not that everything related to social innovation is bad, and there are many good examples of how social innovation has been used. For instance, Nesta developed this app that connects people that you know are having an health issue to doctors that are in the area. So before the ambulance arrives, you can use the app to see if there is any doctor in the area, which is good. But again, you can see that this might have the side effect of government divesting from ambulance efficiency and leaving it to the citizens approach. And another problem is that many governments are switching to this devolution by giving more and more responsibility to local government and local communities to team up and to create and provide social services to the citizens. The problem is that most of the time the resources, these new responsibilities, do not come with new resources. So that's the reason why many people have talked about civic intelligence in relationship to neoliberalism and the decay of the welfare state and essential social services. So to conclude, because I think we don't have much time, I believe that civic intelligence, it's really interesting, and the examples, the projects that come with it, social innovation, open government, e-government, open data, are all very good. The problem is that sometimes we're so hyped about these new concepts that we don't see the broader picture and how in practice they affect essential public services that were in place before, and how they might serve as a tool for the policymaker to switch to cut important services in times of austerity. And we all know the problems many governments are facing. But I think it's essential to talk about it and to keep this in mind when we think about platforms and the ability of communities to really solve societal problems by resorting to collective intelligence. And yeah, that would be basically it. I think I took already too much time. And well, I wanted to hear what you think, or this was kind of a short presentation, which I'm sorry was not very well structure maybe, but it was just to trigger some thoughts on your side. So please, if you have any question, just write it on the chat or speak up if you're on Google Hangouts, and I'll be happy to respond to those if you want me to clarify certain things. And if not,
I have a question actually, if I can.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, because this seems a lot to do with how government provides services. That's what you're mostly focused on.
Yeah.
But I think one aspect is also more on the decision side, how the government takes decisions. And I think we have seen a lot of ideas, maybe especially in Italy nowadays, about citizens taking decision themselves, taking back from the representational systems, these kind of things. And I wonder, one of the things that we often worry about, maybe the skeptical people, is that, crowds and majority rule are not always the best, are not always what you would refer to the interest of society, right? And what is isn't there the risk that we end up having, homogeneity in enforcing effectively people to behave all in the same way, right? Because
I think this is an extremely relevant point, because we always exactly talk about the wisdom of the crowd and the importance of participatory approaches. But as you can see, most of the time, participatory approaches, public consultations, are also a tricky issue, because, and you refer to the Italian example, and for instance, if you think about the 5-star movement platform, you see that it's a very small minority of the actual electorate of the 5-star movement which provides ideas. And on top of that, if you go on the Rousseau platform, most of the ideas that the citizens bring forward are not really taken into account. But without going into politics, that shouldn't be the goal. I certainly agree that participatory approaches and how governments take decision is a tricky question. And the way I like to see it is, again, is about education and trying to bring information out there. And that's the reason why most of the time we're moving also more and more towards an evidence-based policy making and policy-making process. But the problem is, who is in charge of taking the evidence? It really also relates to a certain approach towards sciences, and I believe in a certain empirical methods, which is also tricky. No, what do you think in that regard?
I couldn't really hear the last thing you said.
Well, I mean, I think an alternative to the majority rule to take decision, or a way to make it better, is to base policy on evidence. But another problem I'm faced with is how this evidence is created, and what kind of empirical evidence is there to justify government decisions.
Yeah, I mean, the other problem is, setting goals. If what is your goal? What is the public good is, a very, very open question. For me, the public good might be different than for what you would refer to the public good. So I think sometimes the issue of having such structured approaches, which nudge people into behaving in a particular way because the incentives are strong, effectively eliminates the possibility for dissent, because in the end you're really pushing people towards a specific version and vision of what society is. Maybe I don't want to engage in society. Maybe I want to be alone.
Yeah.
And you don't have the right to take that away from me. And I think usually, if you look, for example, at politics, usually constitutions in general tend to define the rights of the individual rather than the what the individual has to do, because it's what you cannot take away from the individual rather than what the individual has to do for society that is important. Yeah. So I think something like that is something that needs to be considered.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And when you try to look at how approaches to civic intelligence, or in general using collective intelligence in public decisions, you always have this issue that the wisdom of the crowd is based on problematic aspects, and it's that there is a minority and all these kind of things. So I see your point, and yeah, I don't know what to say.
I think it's just a point I wanted to make. But thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else there? And well, I don't know. Maybe we can even discuss. Well, for instance, problems or I don't know, examples of civic intelligence. Maybe you want to ask about something in that regard, or otherwise we can easily move to the next speaker, because we're running out of time, and I think we all want to finish on time. Well, if that's the case, if nobody wants to ask any question or share doubts or disagree, we can move to Yannick, who's gonna have the floor now. And Yannick, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you see me?
I can see you, and well, you're now presenting to everyone, so you can share your presentation and start with your presentation.
Thank you, Peter. So, 1 second. Just give me feedback if it works here with right. Do you see my presentation right now?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. So I decided to focus mainly on 2 papers, since my focus was about new models, new formal models to cope with collective intelligence. So the first paper, I will give you these slides so you will have the complete references, is groups of diverse problem solvers can outperform groups of high ability problem solvers. And the second is society semantics and the logic way to collective intelligence. So I'll try to make it as quick as possible and the less technical possible, which I think will be the case. But please give me feedback if there's any clarifications. Please also interrupt me during my presentation. So let's start. I'll start by this article. The author of this article, Professor Page of Michigan University, is a professor of complex theories, and so he once did a test on his class to compare his competent students to a set of people who had less cues about the questions that were asked in the questionnaire. And he saw that actually his very able students, which you can see in the graph right now, did not always better than the set of people who were less prepared but with more diverse backgrounds. And so he thought that there might be a problem in the simulation process, or in the computation, in the code of the computation that he was running to analyze the results of the answers to the questionnaire. So he recoded it, but he found the same result. And so he came up with these results, where you see that systematically the random agents do better in performance than the agents that are selected on purpose to be the best agents. So you see on the left performance, on the right diversity, systematically the group which has an ability, but not as much as the group of best agents, but a bigger diversity systematically outperforms the group of the best agents. So he tried to formalize this with a model to come up with the reasons for this, and this has been a classical paper in the impetus that has had multidisciplinarity in the last years. So the main points of this paper are that it puts forward a general mathematical framework for modeling functionally diverse problem-solving agents. What means functionally? It means that they have diverse backgrounds and diverse cognitive characteristics. What is the main result? I already said it. It shows that a random collection of intelligent agents, and it's important that they are minimally intelligent because not a random collection of random agents, outperforms the collection consisting of only the best agents. And why is it relevant to the topic of collective intelligence? Provides a theoretical base that mirrors this value of multidisciplinarity, which is often talked about. And yeah, right. This is the cognitive and background diversity is key, as I already mentioned. Let's go a bit more in detail. What is this general mathematical framework about? Every agent is presented as a couple. What does this mean? We have two kinds of characteristics of each agent. So this is going a bit into the technical, but I'll explain it immediately. So the internal, I just want to focus on the notion of internal language because it will be relevant also to the other paper. So the internal language of the agent is obviously different from the language that unites the society of agents, so the collective entity of agents. And so it will have different outcomes in the process of problem solving. This is the key idea. We don't have to care about the mapping from all. This is what fundamentally this line that I just showed means. And then we have the other part of the couple that constitutes an agent is his heuristics. So his heuristics goes from the solutions expressed in the internal language, which is the language, the agent's own internal language, to a subset of all the solutions. So every agent has a partial insight on the problem that has to be solved, right? And in this model, every agent is modeled by these two things: his internal language and the heuristics that depends on this internal language. And so there are a few conditions, because as I mentioned, this theorem, which is basically expressed in the title of the paper, does not count in every case. So the conditions are following: the problem must be difficult, so it mustn't be a problem that everyone is able to solve. Everyone must be minimally smart, so some ability that is useful to solve this problem. The diversity condition, so there must be a considerable diversity among these problem solvers, and the group has to be quite big, and we will see in the following why this matters. And the last condition is that obviously the group of more diverse agents outperforms the group of best chosen agents only if conflict doesn't arise. And this is intuitionally very simple. The more diverse backgrounds and cognitive characteristics are, the more it is likely that conflict arises. So the theorem says, I'll say it once again, a random group of intelligent problem solvers will outperform a group of the best problem solvers. And why is this? So let's go. Now we really come to the main point of the paper. So the first idea is yes, this is the reason why the group has to be large. So the probability will tend to 1, the larger is the group, that there is at least one agent that has found the optimal solution, so the best solution to the problem. And this directly depends upon the second idea, which is that the bigger the group is, and the more similar will be the background of the best agents. So this means that the best agents will have a very continuous performance. So they will almost always have some solution to the problem. But the point is that as they are very similar, they will always behave more like a single agent than the group of diverse agents does. So this intuitively, this can be captured by the assertion that in a group of diverse agents, you will always have some solution that is kind of out of the box, something that a specific scientist of that discipline would never have thought about. And this is really key to this theorem. I won't present any formal tools of mathematics because this is not the point of this forum. But and I think that these two conditions are enough to capture what the essence of what this paper has to tell us as regards collective intelligence.
So, like, is there mentioned in the paper like an optimal number of members in the group?
Yes.
Like, well, because as the group becomes large and larger, the best problem solvers became similar, and so the performance are worse.
In the paper, this is not mentioned, the optimal number, although I think that you're right that there is one optimal number. But I think the reason for this is that this depends also on the problem that is being faced. So if you think about some problems that are being dealt by big companies that consult more than one consultancy agencies, these will have a quite large number of problem solvers. If you think about some problems that the departments are facing in universities, these will traditionally have lower numbers of problem solvers. And I think it depends on the nature and on the difficulty of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. But the point is that there is always this trade-off. Like in the same way there is a trade-off between the ability and the diversity, there is also a trade-off between the nature of the problem and its difficulty. So also it's the multiple. So how to express this? So how the complex nature, so exactly, so the more complex the problem, and complex not in the sense of complicate, but really in the sense of complexity, the more diversity will be beneficiary, and the bigger the set of diverse problem solvers can be without falling out of control, right? So this is the point. Also, because we have to consider that the probability of a conflict arising among these diverse problem solvers rises also in proportion to their number, right? This is quite logic. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Cool. Let's go on. So yes, and this is another the line I just showed is another implication of this proportion. So as they are more diverse, they are less likely to be very able, and this is basically the contra, like the other side of the medal of saying that the more very able they are, so yes, exactly. So the more optimal the agents are, the more similar they will tend to be, right? So this is exactly the other side of the medal of this assertion.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask a question about what you mean by very able? Because you say that a group of best problem solvers is is less diverse, but what do you mean by best problem solvers? Best in what sense?
So best would be that in an individual test, they would outperform an individual test of the other agents.
So on the specific task that the group
Yes.
is going to try to solve later. Okay, so first they're tested individually and then they try together.
Yes.
Okay,
this would be the point. Like the first experiment that then gave rise to this paper, and it was not an experiment. It was just to test the complex analysis class that Professor Page gave, was obviously made between. So the class in complex analysis was in complex systems, because he's teaching also pure mathematics. But so this class in complex systems was obviously composed by students that were really proficient in this subject, and in an individual test they would have done better than the students composing the diverse group. But as a whole group, they did systematically worse than this diverse group, right? So this is when we say, but the diverse group has to be minimally able, because if not, they won't come up with a reasonable solution. It will be like intuitively, it will be like too much out of the box, right? And so they have to be minimally able, but not very able, because in that case they will be specific scientists of that field. Did I answer your questions more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, the take-home message of this paper, they say, is that we should do more than just exploit our existing diversity. We may want to encourage even greater functional diversity given its advantages. So it's not only it's not anymore only a question of politically correct to be diverse, and diverse means in every case. Although, I mean, here they refer mainly to cognitive diversity, and but the point is that it should be encouraged in every case, because it has been shown by this model to be actually really better in many cases, given that the solutions that I mentioned are fulfilled. So I think that we're done with this paper. Yes, we are. I just wanted to highlight the last thing. So let's keep in mind the difference between what they call the internal language of an agent and what then is the outcome of the solution of the set of agents as a whole, because this is the fact that they stress this difference is something which is common with the second paper I'm going to present, and that is going to be like a very important part of the take-home message I tried to draw from what there is common in these two papers. So this paper is more recent than the one I just presented. The one I just presented is 2004. This one is 2018. So it was just published, and I think I encourage those of you who are interested in logic to read this, because it gives a very how to say heterogeneous insight into the logic models that can represent the processes of collective decision making and of collective knowledge. I will be presenting just a part of this, because there was really a complete survey, and it would take much effort to follow it formally the same way as they did. I tried to give you like the essence of this paper in a nutshell, so that those who are interested, those among you who are interested, can go and read it. And as I said, you will have the reference. So let's begin. So the motivations. They say that collective intelligence is very à la mode, but the point is that not every operation that brings agents together is something positive, because there is the possibility that you are creating like collective biases, so that you are how to express this, that you're creating a process according to which every agent will systematically do some mistakes about some subject. And this is, I want to highlight, a problem society as a whole is already facing, and Pietro has been talking about this too, if I understood well, although I joined the session a bit late. So they cite this article. I will be giving the reference to, and there are 4 criteria for positive collective intelligence. So diversity of opinions, independence, decentralization, and aggregation. And these 4 conditions should ensure that bringing agents together doesn't affect their capability of proposing solutions to problem, but on the contrary makes the individual capability, so gives a better outcome than the individual outcome, right? And but the point is that these 4 conditions give always rise to semantics that are not classical. So and I will be explaining right now what this means. So society semantics. What is society semantics? Society semantics model the highly complex process of combining information or behavior originating from different sources and drawing sensible conclusions from them. And so it's basically a model for accounting for complexity. But what does this mean more precisely? So what do we mean by classical logic? So I want to highlight for those who don't have a background in logic. So there is more than one possible logic, depending on the rules that we choose that this logical language, that this logical system rests upon. And when we generally mention logic, we refer to the logic that Aristotle invented, so the classical logic. And so the two most famous conditions for logic to be classical is the law of the excluded middle and the law of non-contradiction. So the law of the excluded middle means that there is no other truth value than true and false. So a statement is either true or false, but it cannot be both. It cannot reign and not reign at the same time. And this is very strongly related to the law of non-contradiction. So that exactly a statement, you cannot have a statement that at the same time says one thing and the contrary of this thing. There are other conditions which I mentioned in the slides, and you can look at them individually when you'll see the slides. But for these purposes, we just need to remember the point of The fact that classical logics are logics with two truth values that do not admit contradictions within one statement. So on the contrary, paraconsistency is the paradigm of reasoning in the presence of contradictions. And this paraconsistency is a tool which is very useful to model societies of agents, where very often statements that are contradictory arise. It is enough that I say A and you say not A for the society that is being composed by us two to be a society which cannot be described through a logic model. But the point is that they have the same mathematical status and they are as coherent as classical logic can be. So it is enough that you choose the right axioms that this logic rests upon. And this is the central point. Paraconsistent paradigm comes closer to mimicking human reasoning than classical semantics do, for the exact reason that I just mentioned. Here I mentioned possible translation semantics. We needn't care about what this is, but we need to care about that. Exactly. So we interpret a sentence of one logic as on the combination of an appropriate set of translations. And this means that we are considering every agent-based logic, so the every internal language of every agent. To make this clearer, I'll go ahead. So why this is useful? In the society formed by perfectly rational agents, contradictions may arise because the local information, so the information of the single agent, must be processed in a higher global level. In this way, the society of agents must be able to identify and support contradictions and to draw sensible inferences taking such contradictions into account. To accomplish this task, the society should be endowed with a formal system which incorporates the logics of agents, expressing their mutual contradictions and making possible to deduce sound information in such environment. I think this sentence is really clear about what they are trying to do. And I want to stress that also when agents have classical logic, so perfectly normal logics, systems may arise with contradictions inside, and this is the main point. So, for example, there was one very famous, to give you a concrete example, there was one very famous airplane crash in 2009 on an Air France flight from Brasilia to Paris, where the measuring instrument, the measuring tools on the planes gave contradictory information, and the pilots were following this information so point by point every time without this, the board software considering the contradictions between these measuring outcomes. And if there had been a model that considered these contradictions and also the partial insights of the pilot and the co-pilot, they probably would have known what the problem was and would have managed to make the plane stable, which they didn't manage to do. And the airplane went into an aerodynamic stall. So they lost control, and all the crew and all the 280 passengers died. So right now there are new models of this kind that are being developed that take into account the contradictions between the agents and the individual agents' knowledge, the measuring tools, and the system as a whole, in the system as a whole, so to say. And how do they do this? The basic idea is that every society is composed by agents, is a set of agents, and each agent is represented as a pair of CI and LI, where CI is a collection of sentences, so all the knowledge that the agent holds intuitively, and LI is the underlying logic language of the agent. So, right, how he deals with this knowledge, what his reasoning rules are, which are directly based on his cognitive characteristics. And in that case, we can then define what an open society is. A society is open if it accepts a sentence in case any of its agent does, and a closed society if it accepts a formula only in case, like a sentence, only in case all of its agents does. And through these tools, we can then model all sorts of situations. I give you an example that they do give. Suppose that a committee has adopted an open policy in the sense of supporting the opinion of accepting a paper if at least one of the referees votes positively, and supporting the opinion of rejecting it if at least one of them gives a negative vote. We can express a referee's opinions by atomic formulas, so by sentences, and the committee's final opinions by non-atomic formulas, so by complex sentences which have variables inside. Under such rules, the society may appear to be itself contradictory, although each agent is perfectly non-contradictory. This incoherence, however, expresses exactly the information that at least two agents disagree about one given task. So what is the take-home message which is common to these two papers in a nutshell? One point is that individual agents have their own way to cope with the world, so they have their own individuality, which is always very different from the others. May we call it an internal language or an underlying logic? The combination of several agents gives rise to different ways to cope with the world. And these give, in turn, sorry, this line isn't very clear. These in turn give rise to unexpected results. So, as the result of the first paper, which is really unintuitive because you would not counterintuitive, because you would expect better agents who are individually better to be better also on the collective level, and unusual models to represent behavior. So logics that are counterintuitive because we are always used to considering a sentence to be either true or false, not to value its contradictions. And so yes, I wanted to stress this counterintuitiveness. And I think that considering these models and trying to build them in the most representative way, so in a way that represents best the behavior of what the actual systems are, is key to giving scientific foundations to collective intelligence. So that's basically it. Thank you, and I'm open to, and I'm happy to answer any questions for what I can do, because it wasn't me who wrote the papers. And I will happy to answer also emails with more detailed questions. Sorry, do you hear me? I think there is something going on, right?
So if there are no questions for the moment, as we passed 8 today, but I think it's worth it because we had Peter Kraft in the first part. Just to conclude, I noticed some of you asked what is the contribution my field could give to collective intelligence. I think this is a question, an interesting question. I imagine the answer could be something like, just look for what you are interested in, if there are problems that can be studied and solved with a collective intelligence approach. like a lack of technical tools for collaboration and something like that. But as I think that this is an interesting question, I was thinking about writing an email to Peter Kraft in order to help us answering. Anyway, so thank you for being here, and see you next Wednesday. Thank you, Yannick, also for your
Thanks a
presentation.
lot.
And bye.
Bye.